Did Russia just manipulate President Trump? Well, according to Pentagon officials, they say that President Trump has been manipulated for weeks, that Russia is playing him like a fiddle. That was the email that I received right after President Trump and Vladimir Putin met in Alaska, that a certain senator's aide let me know that there's questions from the Pentagon whether or not President Trump is playing right into Vladimir Putin's hands. Well, now it's out. Look at this. It says Trump admits Putin may be stalling for time with meeting. What exactly are they talking about? Well, here's what we know, and I'm going to read this to you. It says right here, President Trump acknowledged that President Vladimir Putin may be stalling for time by agreeing to another summit as Ukraine's leader pushed for more U.S. weapons in Washington in a bid to force the end of Russia's invasion. Well, here's what's happening. We knew that President Zelensky from Ukraine was going to meet with President Trump today. They did that. They had a good talk. It was like a roundtable discussion. Great, right? Reporters were there. The whole thing televised. Perfect. They answered a lot of questions. Both of them did. And we knew this was going to happen. Just yesterday, Vladimir Putin and President Trump had a 2-hour phone conversation, which President Trump said it was showing progress. There's momentum. There's discussions. And they agreed, likely within the next 2 to 3 weeks, they're going to meet in Hungary. Okay? And President Trump said today that it's not just going to be a one-on-one meeting with President Trump and Vladimir Putin, that President Zelensky will be in the mix as well. We don't know if he will be in the room, which I doubt, but he will be around, which could mean they could all come together and figure out some type of deal. Well, I want to read you some of the email that I received right after the summit, okay? But I'm also going to tie in some stuff into this to really explain what's happening and why all this is going on at this time and why there's a real threat of World War III. It says, why is Trump still threatening to send Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine? Well, he is trying to get Vladimir Putin to agree to a peace deal. That would push Russia closer because now they would have leverage. Ukraine would actually have leverage to get Russia to the table. It says, but why would Putin not take this as a serious threat? Simple, because President Trump hasn't sent the missiles to Ukraine yet. And after the phone conversation yesterday, and now there's conversations that there's going to be a meeting in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it's highly unlikely those missiles get sent. It says the problem is that Trump has had talks with Russia to negotiate a peace deal, and Putin sounds like he's all in on it. But it doesn't go much further than the start of the negotiations. And while the negotiations are ongoing, Russia continues to hammer Ukraine. And Ukraine is being told, you cannot fight back. No launching anything into Russia. But yet Russia continues to attack Ukraine. It says, so the Trump administration is getting tired of getting nowhere with Russia and continues to take more of Ukraine. Now, reports are indicating that the Pentagon is open to sending Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. The only restriction, though, as of right now, is they would not be able to use them unless the United States says they can and gives them the go-ahead. So, Russia right now is working with President Trump and Ukraine on a peace deal, according to reports. But if the missiles are never used, okay, and Russia does continue to move forward and have good faith negotiations, that's all that they want. That's all Ukraine wants. That's what President Trump wants. To have a open, honest discussion, no games, where Russia is talking about how they can end this war with Ukraine. But here's the thing. According to one White House official, they said they believe the only reason why Putin and Trump had that 2-hour phone call was to try to de-escalate the situation before President Trump met with Zelensky today, which we all know Zelensky was going to push for the Tomahawk missiles. According to reports, he did. Now, I want to show you a couple things. Okay, look at this. This is just from today. It says Trump says Putin meeting likely won't include Zelensky. Okay, but he will be in the area and he will be kind of read in on the situation. Now, here's where things get interesting. I want to play a couple clips for you. Look at some of these right here.
I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand tomahawks to your opposition? I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. He really didn't like the idea. No, I said it that way. You have to be a little bit lighthearted sometimes, Adam.
Typically ask you not to provide tomahawks?
So, wouldn't anybody? I mean, it's been in the news. Who wouldn't do that?
So the reporter asked, did President Putin specifically ask you not to provide tomahawks to Ukraine? He said, well, who wouldn't? It's been in the news. Again, now it's coming out. This is something that I was kind of informed about right after the Alaska meeting, that the Pentagon was a little concerned, and so were other countries, that they were all concerned that what was happening is Russia was just trying to draw out these negotiations, which essentially is what Russia's doing now. Vladimir Putin is saying, hey, that was a great conversation, yesterday. Let's meet in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Let's talk about this. Meanwhile, we're still seeing thousands of people dying every single day as a result of this war between Russia and Ukraine, which is what everybody's wanting to stop. I want to play you another clip for you, though, as well. Listen to this. Okay, this is interesting because now the reporters are asking the same questions. Okay, what the Pentagon was concerned with weeks ago, now reporters are bringing to your attention. Look at this.
Yeah, I think the Russians knew exactly what they were doing when they tried to intervene, John, less than 24 hours before this meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky today at the White House. They knew exactly what was likely to be discussed in this meeting between, of course, the President Donald Trump, and Zelensky. And really the goal, I think, of that call was to try and make sure tomahawks are off the table. Now, it doesn't appear that it is off the table, but I can tell you, John, that I know from my conversations with people at the White House that the president had largely seen the possibility and kind of this floating publicly this idea of providing Kyiv with these long-range American missiles as a threat to try and force the Russians back to the table.
That was the big thing, okay? That this was seen as a threat in order to get Vladimir Putin back to the negotiation table. That was all it was. But again, it's an empty threat unless President Trump actually sends the missiles to Ukraine. But that right there, even if they don't use them, according to the Kremlin, says that is an escalation of war. And so this is why we are right there, potentially on World War III, right on the doorsteps. Just keep listening.
Obviously, we saw that phone call take place yesterday, and just on that lengthy phone call, things quickly progressed enough to have the president and President Putin vow to meet in just a couple weeks in Budapest to continue the negotiations. Now, I should say that call with the Russian president came after weeks of the President Donald Trump being, of course, very frustrated with Putin. He was not living up to some of the commitments that the president and other Trump administration officials believe that he had made in that summit just weeks ago in Alaska. But
I do want to come out and point out one thing, that the United States was, we had intelligence where Russia was going to invade Ukraine, and we knew about that for weeks, okay? And then Russia started sending troops and equipment to the Russia-Ukraine border. But yet Russia kept saying, no, this is for training exercises and purposes only. Right? Don't worry about it. It's just for training. And essentially what happened is we allowed Russia to go on for days and kind of build up this army that when they were ready, they could invade Ukraine. So Russia isn't against doing this, where they are all for telling you one thing, right? Dragging it out until they're ready. And this is something that we heard about last year as well. Now, not this scenario as it stands now, but what we heard about last year was that Vladimir Putin was just trying to kind of extend and drag out this war, talking about, yeah, it's, it's not as bad as people say, as bad as it's shown on the news, right? Everything's good. But the reason for it, according to reports, was because he was trying to get military personnel from China, which they did. Chinese soldiers were fighting in Russian uniform. This happened last year. And not only that, but they were also trying to get more equipment. That's what they were trying to do. So pretty much just prolong this war, because there was a point where Russia was pretty much doomed. They were done for. Vladimir Putin had to reach out to Xi Jinping, had to reach out to North Korea, had to reach out to Iran, had to reach out to all his allies in order to pretty much restock Russia so they can continue this war. That's essentially what the Pentagon feels is happening right now.
To turn to today's meeting, we do know that, of course, asking for more weapons is going to be on the agenda of the Ukrainians. And really, this meeting comes at a point where we've heard the president and many of his closest advisors here in the White House argue that it might be time to take a more offensive posture toward Russia. Now, did that change because now they're going to be having this summit with Putin? We'll see. I think it's likely to probably expect that they don't want to rock the boat too much as these negotiations are happening.
Yeah, that's the hard part. And that's where some experts believe that President Trump is pretty much stuck between a rock and a hard place, because right now he knows what Vladimir Putin's doing. He's just prolonging this, just buying time while they continue to hammer Ukraine. According to one source, and I don't know how credible this is, but he says that there's been conversations from the Kremlin that what they're trying to do is just drag this out long enough so they can get to a stopping point where they can get as much of Ukraine as possible, and knowing that President Trump is likely going to ask the Ukrainian President Zelensky to just give up the territory that Russia currently occupies, and Russia is going to stop hammering your cities. They will stop taking over more of your territory. That's what President Trump said before. That was part of the negotiation plan originally, and Zelensky said no, that he didn't like that idea, which is why we're still here. So we're going to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, but really over the next several days, and this weekend will be a crucial weekend. If we see a lot more, bombs and drones hitting Ukraine, and Russia is taking more of Ukrainian territory, this just shows that what the Pentagon was concerned with originally is exactly what is happening. So we'll see what happens, but that is what we know as of today. So again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.